Hello everyone, this is Grace. It is July the 27th, 2023. And we are going to be discussing, in this video, we're going to be discussing the Passover. Now, this is not going to be a lesson on the Passover. This is more like an introduction to what is going to be coming in the future. If you look at the screen, you'll see this, it's not really a chart, this graphic that I have, which has the Passover laid out for you. This is the true Passover that was given to Moses, and I know that it is a lot. It's really different than what we have learned, and I understand. I understand it's a lot to take in. It was for me as well. But there is a lot of support for this. Not a lot. There's a tremendous amount of support for this in the Bible. Here's how I got to this graphic. I don't really know what to say, to this image here. Or here's how I got to this picture. Before, if you've been a subscriber for long enough, you know that I took the dates out of the Old Testament and I tried to apply them to the New Testament, and it was so confusing. All of the days got jumbled up. I started thinking that Jesus died on the Sabbath, and I don't know, everything just got confused because they've mixed up the dates in the Old Testament. They won't match the New Testament. So what I did was I went through and I took the picture that was given in the New Testament, put it in chronological order, and this is the picture of the Passover and the feast days that was given to Moses according to the New Testament. And once you have this picture, if you go back to the Old Testament, just like when we discovered that the day began at high noon, suddenly things started to make sense. It's exactly the same with this. So we're not going to look at this for a while, though, because there's other things that have to be discussed beforehand so that when we go to the Passover, we can just work right through and we already have an understanding of the concepts that are needed without taking several breaks. Now, I have a couple of examples for you, though. I have a couple of examples, and we're going to look at the examples with the understanding that this is true, that the Passover began on the 9th with the choosing of the lamb. They chose the lamb. They selected the lamb on the 10th. Selecting this is not final, by the way. The only thing that I could find really on the 10th was that Jesus just never left the temple of Jerusalem. There was no confinement or anything, and you'll see that in one of the examples. I just put a few in here so that you could see that this is the truth. This is what really happened. I'll tell you one other thing, but I have to do it. Yeah, I'll tell you this. I just recently did a video saying that there was 2 times in the year when everyone made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. That's a mistake. There's only 1 time in the year when everyone made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And it's neither one of the days that I told you. This is the only day of the year that there was a pilgrimage made to Jerusalem. There was 1 time in the year when a pilgrimage was made to Jerusalem. So I kind of have to get these things straightened out first, because this picture is so different than what we learned before. It just requires a new approach. So let's look at the examples that I have, and just keep in mind that, just consider that this is true. Remember, things start to fall in place once you have the truth, and you can see the air is just a little bit easier. Now we're not working on strict dates and times that were given in the Old Testament. Now we're looking at the actual written testimony, and there are lies in there as well. There's still lies and deceptions. And I'll tell you one. There is no drink offering. There's no drink offering at all. It's just a lie. And I'm starting to come to the understanding that there probably was not a meal offering as well. But there definitely wasn't a drink offering. There was no drink at that communion. All of that is lies, to the level of what they wrote in about divorce. Yeah, remember they wrote it in They wrote it in 3 of the Gospels so that they could support one another. Because if it's written in there 3 times, then it seems more true. It has a more. It's harder to undo. So it was very difficult to undo those drink offerings for me. And I'm still trying to figure out about the drinking of blood. But I know for a fact that there is no drink offering in the communion. There's just not. And it certainly wouldn't be wine. Oh, it certainly wouldn't be alcoholic wine is what I'm trying to say. Wine, it's not wine. Jesus said he was the water of life or something like that. That would have been water in that cup, period. Just all of that is just a lie. But we'll look at that later. I'm just trying to give you some information that needs to be cleared up so that I won't have to stop and talk. No, I'm just trying to give you some information so that this will be a little bit easier to accept. That's what I'm trying to do without trying to tell you the whole story. So let's look at the couple of the examples that I have. Maybe that'll help. Oh, I just need you to remember that it begins on the 9th. That's the first day of unleavened bread, but you still have leaven in your house. Then you clean it out on this day, and then your first day of unleavened bread really begins on the 10th. So you have your Passover, which starts on the 9th. It ends on the 15th. That's your 7 days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? The Passover, the actual true Passover meal, was kept on the evening of the 10th. The lamb was slaughtered on the 14th at high noon, and then this would have just been the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and this would have represented our day of. That's something we have to go over. Actually, we have to go over what these feast days mean. So this is the day that everyone is made perfect, but not transfigured. Okay, we're all transfigured together on the 8th day. But that's what that represents. So anyway, enough of that. Let's look at the examples. I just wanted to point out that the Passover begins on the 9th day, and then it ends on the 15th day. That's the 7 days. Or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Feast of Unleavened Bread does. So we're in Numbers 10, and we'll read through this real quick. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Make thee 2 trumpets of silver, of a whole piece shalt thou make them. I'm sorry, we don't need all this. We don't need all of this. We already know that they put these in order. So when I read this the first time, let me read it to you. Also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpet over your burnt offerings, and over your sacrifices, and over your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. Now when I first read this bothered me a little, because solemn days and beginning of months, that's the beginning of the year. So what comes before that? So I looked in the Gill commentary, and the Gill commentary said that this would have been, the gladness would have been when they conquered in war. So I accepted that. But at the same time, I was like, well, I just thought it was odd. I accepted it, and I could still accept it because it's reasonable. It doesn't take anything out of order, you see. But I just thought it was odd that it would be listed first over our solemn days and our beginning of months. It just seemed odd to me. If the Passover is on the 9th, then this day of gladness becomes our Passover feast. You can also call this the communion, or the Lord's Supper, the wedding feast. It goes by all of those names in the Bible. This is our day of gladness. Now things are in order. Now you have the day of gladness during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now you have the beginning of months listed separately. Your solemn days, your day of gladness, your solemn days, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is, well, that's going to be the beginning of the months as well. And the beginning of months, I guess these can be the same still, but now it's in order. It makes more sense. The beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is going to start on the 9th, but you clean out the Feast of you clean out the unleavened on the 10th, which is also the day of gladness, and then you have everything else just flows in order. And these are, of course, they cross paths because they're both Feast of Unleavened Bread days as well. These also. Anyway, so there's that. Another thing, I think I jumped ahead of myself. Another thing is this verse. No, that's right. Well, here. Another thing is this verse here. And it came to pass on the 20th day of the 2nd month in the 2nd year that the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle of the testimony, and the children of Israel took their journey out of the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. Now, I didn't read down far enough. I wish I had, because I think they were walking for 3 days, which is impossible. I wish I didn't think of it until now, but I think I read this story before, and I think they're traveling for 3 days. And that's not possible the way that we understand the old feast, because in the previous chapter it tells them, and the Lord spoke unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the 1st month in the 2nd year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season. In the 14th day of this month at even ye shall keep it in its appointed season, according to all the rites of it, and according to all the ceremonies thereof shall ye keep it. Moses spake unto the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover. If you keep the Passover, you keep it according to all the rites and according to all the ceremonies thereof. That also applies to the 2nd month. I didn't pull up the scripture for the 2nd month. I'm sorry. I wanted this, but I forgot to look up the 2nd month. I wanted to point out that you keep the Passover according to all the rites and according to all the ceremonies thereof. That means that the last day is also going to be a Sabbath. So if the Sabbath is on the 21st, why then are they leaving on the 20th of the 2nd month? They're leaving the day before, just hours before they have to stop, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, because they don't tell you the number of women and children, all had to pack up their stuff and move on the 20th, knowing that the 21st at noon is going to be a Sabbath. And everything would have to be packed. Everything would have to be unpacked. The tents would have to go up all before high noon on the Sabbath. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I really think that, let's see if we can find it here. Where's my search here? Here it is. And they departed from the mount of the Lord 3 days' journey, and the ark of the covenant. And they departed from the mount of the Lord 3 days' journey, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them 3 days' journey to search out a resting place. It's impossible that they went 3 days' journey. It's impossible, because they would have been traveling on the Sabbath. They would have been working the animals. They would have been working themselves. That's a lot of work to travel and carry every single thing that you own. That's a lot of work. Anyway, that's just one real quick thing that straightens itself out when you understand that the Sabbath ended, that the Feast of Unleavened Bread was from the 9th until the 15th. Here's one, much more subtle, but still I did notice. Moreover, Josiah kept the Passover unto the Lord into Jerusalem, and they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. Now, it's very subtle, but if you read this in order, it says they kept the Passover unto the Lord. Another thing that is important, it says in Jerusalem. We'll figure out more about that later, though. That has to do with what I was saying about I hadn't found a lot of information out about Jesus, what happened on the 10th. Jesus never left Jerusalem on the 10th. That's the only day that he stayed there, and he didn't leave. He slept in the mountains. But anyway, so that's all I have about that, actually. Moreover, Josiah kept the Passover unto the Lord in Jerusalem. So he kept the Passover, and then it says, and they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. This is out of order. This isn't right. Listen, you can talk like this if you want to, but you don't write stuff like this on paper and expect for people to have a clear understanding. They killed the Passover on the 14th, and they kept the Passover. That's the way it should have been written, because this is saying something entirely different. This is saying that they kept the Passover on the 9th in Jerusalem, and they killed the Passover on the 14th. That's what this is saying. If you speak it, then you can then you can sometimes change the words around and then offer more explanation. But writing things down, you have to understand that we don't know the person that's speaking. We don't understand their mind, or that's why when you read these words, you have a tendency to think that the people that are operating are dumb, because they're not telling you every single thing that they're doing and every single thing that they're thinking. And so you think, oh, well, they didn't understand because they didn't write it. No, that's not true. It's because it's written that you tend to think that. You tend to not give them the benefit of the doubt. In reality, you'll know the person, and you kind of can work these things out. This could never be acceptable as a Passover. And not be considered accurate, because you can't keep the Passover and then kill the Passover lamb on the 14th unless you kept the Passover before the 14th. This is just the way it is. It's just the way it is. It becomes illogical. It's false. It's either true or it's false, and it's false. And you just have to think of it that way, because that's really the way it is. You don't keep the Passover unto the Lord in Jerusalem, semicolon, whatever. And they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. It's not accurate. The little thing. But it makes sense when you know that the Passover was on the 9th, 10th. Daniel. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I forgot to open my calendar. Hold on. Okay. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth. Neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And in the 4th and 20th day of the 1st month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel, then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with gold and ephods. We don't need any of the rest of that. The point was this, is that Daniel was fasting for 3 full weeks. And then the angel came on the 24th day. So if you subtract 21 days, that means that Daniel fasted through the feast of unleavened bread. He would have fasted through the entire feast of unleavened bread. However, if you know that the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and let me show you the chart again, it ended on the 1st of the month. It ended on the 1st of the year. It didn't begin on the 1st of the year. It started the last week of the year, and the last day was on the 1st of the year. So then if we look at the calendar, and we say it's the 24th, well, let's look at the calendar. I'm just going to tell you. What it works out to is Daniel kept the feast on the 1st. The very next day he began his fast on the 2nd. So the 2nd, he fasted 3 full weeks. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's 3 weeks there. But in order for this day to count as a part of the full week, then he had to have ended on the 24th. So that's 3. This is a half day. He started on the 2nd. So this is a half day. So you have 1 week, then you have 2 weeks, then you have 3 weeks. He couldn't have stopped on this day, because otherwise that would be a half day too. He had to have stopped on this day, which is the 24th, when the angel arrived. The very day after the Feast of Unleavened Bread is when Daniel actually fasted. Things just start to become clearer when you have the correct understanding. That's all I'm saying. So don't dismiss it yet. There's plenty of evidence. I think there is. I don't want to use that word because you may think there isn't. But I will say that I myself was very reluctant to believe it. I just didn't want to believe it. But when things, now I cannot unsee it. It's just there. It's like it's like when we discovered that the new day began at high noon. I just couldn't unsee it once I saw it, because it's true. I think that's the last of my scriptures. Yes, it is. So I will leave it at that. And that's what we're going to be working toward these next couple of videos. I'll talk with you in the next video. We'll put that up as we go out. I'll talk to you then.